one of the biggest statements, it's almost like a statement that, like, it drives me crazy, but I hear it all the time. When people say, well, you know, Africa is not for everybody, as if Europe or America is supposed to be for everybody, and that's the standard. And so, hey, you know, Africa is somehow this substandard species of existence. And when I hear it, it's kind of like, yeah, you know what, it's true. It's not for everybody. But neither is America or Europe or Australia or Canada. And I think that what makes us say that? You know, I think that's the part. What makes us say that, and, you know, I mean, we could put any place and exchange it, but I'm talking about Africa in particular. Is it because it doesn't, certain parts of it, certain parts, it might not have all of the Western amenities that someone has been accustomed to? Is that what it means? Or why does that even, you know, have to be a part of the conversation as far as what is, you know, that is not for everyone? Granted, it's not. But my point is that neither is, you know, a lot of people can't deal with the overt racism in certain parts of America. But it's not all of America, but certain parts of America. Some people can't deal with that same thing in certain parts of Europe. So that won't work well for them. But I think the overwhelming statement, though, that comes is as if America and Europe are a superior standard, and that's what people should aspire towards, without realizing that the very thing that makes America and Europe and Australia and Canada and all these other places work so well is Africa. I think that's the part that gets lost in the sauce. That the wealth of America, the wealth of Europe, the wealth of all these other places, much of it comes from Africa. The cocoa, the rubber, the diamonds, the oil, the copper, the bauxite, the uranium, the tanzanite. I mean, we could go on and on and on. The different resources, the different foods that are taken, the natural resources, the salt that comes from Africa is then taken to China and processed and then sold right back to Africa. The rice that comes from Africa, even though rice is grown many different places, even though cocoa is grown other places, but Ghana and, Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, number 1 and number 2 producers of cocoa in the world respectively. So that Swiss chocolate, chances are some of that Swiss chocolate comes from one of those places, maybe even Uganda, Nigeria, somewhere else. That the cocoa that comes, the raw cocoa that comes, chances are comes from those places in Africa. The Belgian chocolate, you know, this is all put in a little package. The Godiva, the Hershey, the Nestle, Hershey even has interest in different parts of Africa. The tires, the rubber on the tires coming from Liberia. So, you know, when we begin to really look at all of these amenities and the amenities that we're accustomed to, you wonder where much of this comes from. Even like the cement, a lot of the cement, you have the Simba cement, you have Dangote cement, you have a lot of different cement companies in Africa. Now, I don't know if all of that's getting around the world. I'm sure some of it is, but the point is that when we begin to respect Africa for what it really is, not just from the natural resource perspective, but from the human resource perspective. Our ancestors were forcefully taken. Some were voluntarily, you know, decided they wanted to go for whatever reason. But the vast majority were forcefully taken from the continent for one reason only, and that was to exploit their labor, their skill, their intelligence, and to build up the wealth in other parts of the world. So even that same attraction is still happening today, because when you make a place, when you strip a place down, or certain parts of a place, let me say that, down so low, now the most talented, intelligent, or not even that, you just make it the condition so undesirable to where the people now want to leave. And so it's like a reverse kind of exodus where people are leaving and a lot of people are not sending anything back. And then what you do is you take those whose ancestors were forcefully taken and you breed in them the disdain and the lack of interest to even want to find out what's going on over there. All the while, the descendants of those who were making the purchases and building their wealth abroad, they now move in and build up their paradises in different parts of Africa at a much lower exchange rate, so their money stretches further. Meanwhile, the other people are sitting on back, like in America on the plantation, working, slaving, doing the same thing, somehow thinking they're different, but they're slaving, doing the same thing, not realizing how wealthy they really are, not realizing all of that because of the education system, because of the mass media, because of the religious systems that tell them they're poor and all of that. And without saying, man, you really have access to the same opportunities as the next person. You still have the ability to get the same education like the next person. You still have that ability. It may be a little bit more difficult, but hey, you know what? Make the most of what you can. Growing up on the American Plantation, they'll tell you this, but not necessarily show you how to do it. They won't necessarily walk you step by step through the process, or culturally, we've been trained to put on their brand. So we'll take more pride in somebody else's brand versus creating our own brand. Now, this is starting to change. I'm starting to see this change in the mentalities of Gen X, baby boomers as well, millennials and Gen Z, and then Y, Z, the next gen after millennials. So you start to see these mindsets starting to shift to where people are saying, I'm gonna create my own brand. I don't need your Louis Vuitton. I don't need your Yves Saint Laurent. I don't need to drive your Benz. I don't need your Lexus. I don't need your Bentley because I'm not gonna I'd rather go buy a $300,000 piece of property somewhere and do like Rich Dad Poor Dad and allow that to pay for me to get whatever I want to get. So people are now positioning themselves and educating themselves and still buying the things they want to buy. Now, I'm not saying don't buy certain things that you want to buy, but the priorities are changing, and they're seeing the value in let me own properties, let me have investments, let me play the game just like y'all play the game. And a lot of people are waking up to it, and they're starting to see how they can bridge the gap economically with the continent of Africa, and they can bring their capital and their resources, not to be a black savior or anything like that, but to see how the collaboration can happen where both sides can have equal share in it, and the equity is shared appropriately, and now you begin to see both sides elevate because the natural resources and the financial resources, where the whole plan was designed to make sure that they never connected again, are now starting to connect. And people are doing it in very strategic ways, because we know that the minute somebody starts running their mouth and telling everybody and bragging and being all Negro about something, that somebody's going to kind of come and try to tear it down. So the best way to do it is just to be, hey, you know what, we do what we need to do. Hush, don't go bragging and boasting and telling everybody, see my new Land Rover, see my new this, that, and the other, and then bringing all that attention on themselves. And then that's when you start getting these cyber Tulsas and these cyber Wilmingtons and these cyber other things starting to happen where, people get taken down that way. So the good thing about it is this: when you begin to understand how rich Africa is, and how if the resources from Africa shut down, it would cause hell in America, it would cause hell in Europe, it would cause hell in a whole lot of other places, and then there would be a whole new respect. I'll give you this last thought though. One of the reasons why Africa is so valuable is because you can grow so much all year long. So it doesn't really have like an off season, except for when you get into the desert areas. Then obviously it's dry, there's no water. But the places that have water year round, the soil is rich, the environment is conducive for life. Those are the things that have made Africa so attractive, and that's why the world has come to extract from it. And yes, you do have those leaders who have bowed down, but it's kind of difficult if you don't have guns and bombs, and if you don't have people a unified system. It's very difficult. And when you have people, even though the British and the French fought each other, and the British and the Dutch and all that, they would fight each other and have some of the most brutal wars ever known to mankind. Even though that would happen, when it came to that loot, they knew how to get together and deal with one another for the sake of whatever that common goal was. Some people say it's white supremacy. I think, that may be some of it, but then it goes back to capitalism and greed. And so when you have players that sit down in a room and can carve out a continent and say, we want this land, and create their own countries and own systems and all of that, that's just the way it is. That's what happened. Those systems on many levels are still very influential, even though they don't have the obvious apparent control that they used to have. But behind the scenes, when money's involved, if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it. So if you see a system like that has worked for hundreds of years, all you do is you just tweak it to make it work, make it work better for modern times or whatever. And that's where the whole global economy comes into it. And you see these global systems have now spread out. That's why you see the influence of the West all over the world. And that's why our minds have been conditioned to look for Western amenities, but still crying foul about the West. It's a twisted kind of dynamic. But once we realize it, we can appreciate being able to recognize it, but then we can also figure out how to position ourselves. So bottom line is, hey, you know what? Africa is not for everyone, but neither is America or Europe. And you find what works best for you and make it work. But, just understanding that without Africa, there is no America. And you would find them cold countries up in Europe collapse so fast because they can't get certain things, because they can't grow certain things, and that stuff would just come crumbling down so fast. So anyway, and I know about somebody in the comments, well, it's the African leaders that are the problem. I did a talk about this. Who's selecting them? Who's electing them? And then if it's such a chronic problem, then why is that? And it's like, I've gotten a lot of good comments in the feedback. And all I do is I put questions out there to cause people to think, because the same thing happens in America. Why are these black cities the way that they are? Why do we have black elected officials, black city council, black school board, black mayor, and everything stays the same? And you still have white gentrification coming into some of these major cities, pushing black people out. You still don't see the economic playing field being leveled in some of the most black, democratic areas in these countries, but black folks still keep voting Democrats in, like it's nothing, just like it's clockwork, like it's been programmed, like it's in the DNA now, and they don't even question. But yet they still get the promises, and people still keep letting them down and don't deliver. So same problem that you have going on in many African countries, same thing going on. So the only thing that you can really do in a case like that is handle your own business in your own household, because from a systemic standpoint, this thing has been set up in such a way where the same philosophy is working in multiple countries. It might show up a little bit differently or whatever, but once you get the people convinced that white is right, once you get the brown people and people who are not white convinced that white is right, then it just works on autopilot. You don't even have to say a word, because they'll do it to themselves and blame themselves at the same time, because they won't see what's the hands that are operating behind the scenes. They'll just go for it and say, well, it's just our leaders and such, and it's like, well, who's funding your leaders? Where is this coming from? Okay, if the leaders aren't being funded, then who's voting these leaders in? Well, they start off right, and then they turn bad. Well, why are they turning bad? What's happening? What's going on? So it goes back to the mindset. It goes back to that. And at the end of the day, the only thing you can control is what goes on into your household. And that's why financial literacy is so important. Because when you understand the financial game, then you can learn how to position yourself accordingly. And because the system is going to be the same no matter what. So you just learn how to navigate and position yourself better within the system. That's the conclusion I've come to, because if I sit up here and keep whining and complaining about all this, that, and the other, and don't make any adjustments within what I can control, then I'm the one that needs to be checked out. So I got to control what I can control and go from there. All right, so that's the deal. My thoughts on it. Nope, Africa's not for everyone, but neither is Europe and America. Like, subscribe, share, and be sure to join us on one of our maximum impact travel experiences to the continent of Africa or African diaspora destinations. More content on the way. Just food for thought to make you kind of sit back and analyze some things going on around you. All right, take care, be safe.
Open up your eyes and see all the fun and mystery. Take an African adventure with Darren and Destiny. From the mountains to the shore, so many things to explore. Take an African adventure with Darren and Destiny.
The Adventures of Darren and Destiny. And Darren and Destiny are twin brother and sister, and you go on their adventures throughout the African diaspora, meaning so African diaspora destinations, primarily focused in Africa, but we go to South America, we're going to go to the Caribbean. Their first book is going to take you to Ghana, and then we're going to go on a safari, and from there we're going to go to Ethiopia, and then we go to Salvador, Brazil. And what the goal is to be able to inspire curiosity in the continent of Africa, in our children from a very young age, and to really tell a more accurate story. Most of our children are exposed to negative images, late night infomercials about how bad things are, everybody's sick, everybody's poor, everyone's uneducated, but that's simply not true. So what Darren and Destiny and their family do is they go to different African destinations. They are learning about these different places. You're beginning to see positive images, but still telling the truth. I mean, that's the important thing, to tell the truth about some of the things that have occurred. But it's all done on our children's level so they begin to understand it. And it begins to pique their curiosity. They begin to learn more. And hopefully one day they will want to explore and visit the continent of Africa and its many countries. There's just so much that Darren and Destiny are able to do, and as they're doing it, it's like they begin to open the minds of a new generation, and they don't get bombarded and indoctrinated with negativity. They're actually able to see positivity and inspiring images and messages about the African diaspora, as well as those who are still indigenous to the continent of Africa, and they begin to learn more and just see things differently. So I'm excited about introducing the Adventures of Darren and Destiny.